Hello everyone, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about using your 65 MOA circle to do range estimation. Okay, so for those of you not familiar, all right, if you look in one of these scopes over here, so you see the 2 MOA dot in the center, and then you see a 65 MOA circle around it, okay? So that's a very useful tool for range estimation. Now, I really like this type of a setup. The big window optics like this holosun 510C, and then the HM3X magnifier behind it, because basically, at close distances, I can just use the dot, and if I'm going further out, I can use the magnifier, and at night, or if I'm going to be like indoors or something, I can just take this off, and now I have a much lighter rifle, and this is not something that needs to be zeroed. So this is my preferred setup, unless like I know I'm going to be like in a desert or something where I'm only shooting long distances. In my environment, usually you can't see, past 100, 200 yards because of all the trees. So it's more likely I would be shooting close than far away, but the magnifier does give you that option. Okay, so again, let's focus on using that circle to do range estimation. So this is basically the circle that I just showed you guys. There's your dot in the center. All right, so at 100 yards, if you're looking at a man, right, if you put this this reticle on a man at 100 yards, he's going to look like that, right? So this is the man. He's going to basically go from the top of the circle to the bottom of the circle. Okay, if he's closer, basically this is going to be bigger, right? So it might be like from here to here. That's not an issue, because the nice thing about using an AR with a 5.56 caliber, right, from zero distance all the way out to 250 yards, there's only like, if you put your dot here, it's either going to be 4 inches high or 4 inches low. Only when you get out to 300 yards, you're going to get about a 10-inch drop. Okay, so from a zero distance all the way out to 250 yards, you just put the dot center mass, you're going to get hits. Even if you put the dot here, right? Because let's say you're only seeing ahead, you put the dot here. Well, from here, 4 inches up, 4 inches down, you can get a headshot without having to worry. So you got to know if somebody is inside of those 250 yards. So that's why it's important for you to know. Like, if you see a man-sized target like this in your circle, he's at 100 yards. Now, let's say you're not shooting, you're not looking at a man. Let's say you're looking at something like a barrel, right? Well, you know what the height of a barrel is, because this is a very common thing, right? Let's say a table, right? A doorknob. These are very common things that usually come at this height. So if you're looking at a doorknob, right, in the door, and the doorknob is like someplace in the center, right, then you know you're at about 100 yards, right? Right. So if you're looking at a man-sized target in your scope and you see something that looks like this, right? Now this is the man over here. Basically, his feet go to the bottom of the circle. His head goes basically to your 2 MOA dot. Okay, now he's at 200 yards. That's 200 yards. Now, if this was a barrel that you were looking at, well, basically it would only go halfway, right? So the barrel, right, that barrel at 200 yards would look something like that. All right. So so we're gonna, for the purpose of this discussion, let's stick to a man-sized target, and then from there you can figure out if you're looking at a barrel or a table or a doorknob, and figure out what type of, you can make estimates, because this is about estimates. Okay. So like I said, if you're looking at 200 yards, a man is going to look like that. Bottom of the circle to the center. And like I said, with a 5.56 caliber, you put the dot in the center here, you'll, with a 50-yard zero, that's pretty much where you're going to hit. If he is a little further out, because sometimes it's hard to tell a difference, between, because remember, people are of slightly different heights. So maybe you got a guy that's a little taller or a little bit shorter. It doesn't make a difference, because even if he's at, taller or shorter, or maybe he's at 250 yards, same deal. You put the dot here, you're going to be in the ballpark. Okay. So the next thing that we need to concern ourselves is with 300 yards, because at 300 yards things start to change a little bit. So at 300 yards, your man is going to start to look like this. So basically, almost the halfway point between your dot and the bottom of your circle here, right? I mean, I'm slightly above here, but in general, it's just above the halfway point. That's pretty much where the average height man of 5'10" is going to come in. And from our perspective, we can tell that if you're looking at a man and he looks like this, right, he's clearly not at 200 yards. I mean, even if this guy is like 6'4", he's not at 200 yards. He's clearly at, he's a little a bit further out. He's going to be at 300 yards. So with a 5.56 caliber, right, at 300 yards, what I would do is I would put this dot like pretty much right in the head, right? If you put this on his head, the bullets would drop right here. So when I'm, so after I range him like this, I would basically then move my dot, and I would put that dot basically right on his head here, and then the bullets are going to drop more or less center mass. Okay, so that's at 300 yards with a man-sized target. Okay, now at 400 yards, it's going to look something like that. All right, so now you can see that you're closer. You're like almost at the halfway point, maybe a little bit below the halfway point between your dot and the bottom of your 65 MOA circle. Okay, so that's clearly way lower than where you were before, right? Because before you were like up here, now you're a bit lower. Okay, so now at the 400 yards, that dot goes on top of his head. So at 400 yards, when you're looking at this, that dot's going to be on top of his head like that, and that's going to drop the bullet's center mass. Okay, so that's what that's going to look at. Again, you're going to range it from the bottom of the circle, and you're going to see that it's about at the halfway point between your dot and the bottom of the circle, maybe a little bit less, but it's going to be about there. And then finally at the 500 yards, okay, it's going to look something like this. So now he's like at the bottom quarter of the circle, right? So the space between here and here, he's at the bottom quarter. All right. So now if you're going to, with this, you got to basically, what you're going to do is you're going to, if this is your man at 500 yards, you're going to cut this in half. So whatever distance you have from here to here is the distance that you're going to hold over. Okay. So when I go back, because I'm going to range him down here, and then when I go over here, I'm going to cut the distance in half, and that's how much I'm going to hold the dot over his head. So it's going to look something like that at 500 yards, and you should be able to get hits center mass. Okay, you should, and basically at 500 yards, unless you've got a a more precise scope, you're probably not taking headshots. You're probably shooting center mass. Now, if you've got like an LPVO that has markings on it, yeah, you would be able to take a specific headshot. But with this setup over here, which is more of a combat setup, right, for people that do a lot more moving than being stationary and shooting from a stationary shooting position, at 500 yards, that's what I'd be looking for. That's what the guy's going to look like. And when you put your dot over his head, there's going to be a nice space in here, like almost like the width of your finger, right? You see the width of my finger there? So, and the way I think of it is you just take your little man, you cut him in half, all right, and whatever, that's the distance that you put between the top of his head and your dot. Okay, so now when I'm shooting at 300 yards, okay, at 300 yards, I did mention this in an earlier video, with the 9mm AR, right? That's what I meant to say. With the 9mm AR, using the 65 MOA circle, 300 yards is the furthest I can, I can really get out there and still be effective. So the same sizes go, right? So at 300 yards, my guy's gonna look something like this. right? He's gonna look something like this. So with this, with the 9mm, what I do is I put the bottom of the circle on top of his head. All right. So that's the, versus what I said before with the 5.56. Here, bottom of the circle goes to the top of his head if you're using a 9mm AR or just a 9mm rifle in general. Okay, so that's what it's going to look like at 200 yards, right? With the 9mm AR. All right, so again, this is the 9mm. So now at 200 yards, my guy is going to look like this. And what I'll do is basically the halfway point between my dot and the bottom of the circle is exactly where my man stands. So that right there is going to give me hits center mass. That's going to hit in the center at 200 yards with 9mm. Okay, so don't get confused between because I just switched over from 5.56 to 9mm. The way you use the circle is the same regardless of what your caliber is, but your holdovers are going to be a little bit different with 5.56 versus with the 9. And I haven't quite figured out what to do with an AK yet. That's something I'd have to experiment a little bit with. Basically I got to get to a distance range, basically well, with the AK, I've been able to get out to 300 yards and get effective hits. And I have to go back and look at the video on what I think with the AK at 300 yards. Okay, I do remember now what I did with the AK at 300 yards. My man looked like this. Okay, and in order to get the hits, what I did is I put the dot over his head like that. So with the AK-47, your man's gonna look like that. So after you range him, right, and you see that he looks like that in your 65 MOA circle, you're then gonna put the dot right on top of his head. And that will drop, actually that will drop the bullets right into his face, actually. No, put the dot in his face and that'll drop him to his chest. I remember now what the holdover was, because I had a 3x3 foot target, and I put the dot on top of the box, top of my target, and it dropped it about 6 inches below that. So yeah, you want to put at 300 yards with an AK, you want to put the dot basically over here on his mouth so you can get hits over here. So that's what, sorry for that confusion, I had to basically dig deep into my memory. So the dot goes right on his head like that, and that'll give you center mass hits. So hope this video was useful. Let me know what you guys think, if you have a different way of estimating range. And like I said, most of the time when we're looking through the scope, almost all the time when we're looking through a scope, right, we're not looking at actual people, right, but we're looking at man-sized targets sometimes. So and that could be something like, let's say, like 2 barrels stacked on top of each other, or a cardboard box that you make out. So if you're able to shoot at long distance, try to make a target that is about, let's say, 6 foot, or thereabout, and get comfortable with, or get used to what that looks like in your scope at different distances. Thanks for watching. I'll talk to you all soon.